Hello everyone, this is Spoiler Lab and today we will talk about the drama, mystery, sci-fi film called I'll Follow You Down. The film begins with a tense chess game between a father named Gabriel and his young son named Erol. Gabriel's wife and Erol's mother Marika are rushing them, because it's time for his son to go to school and his father, the talented scientist Gabriel White, is late for the airport for an important scientific conference at Princeton University. They do not have time to finish this game and Gabriel gives his son exactly 3 days to think things over and finally try to beat him. The main thing is not to touch the pieces and leave everything on the board as it is. At the airport, Erol and his mother see off their father, who promises to be there for dinner on Friday and finish this chess game with his son. And if Erol defeats him, then dad promises to give him an old pocket watch from his grandfather, which he always carries with him on trips. Happy Erol sends greetings to his grandfather and asks him to visit them too. Gabriel kisses his wife and leaves. On the morning of the third day, Erol continues to look closely at the board, thinking about how to beat his father. At this moment his school friend, a girl named Grace, walks in after him and they get on the school bus together. After taking her son to school, Marika excitedly sends a voice message to her husband, who all this time suspiciously doesn't feel well. On the school bus, Erol sits with Grace and he clearly likes her. In front of her, he brags that he built a spaceship out of Lego for the two of them and for their unborn child. At the appointed time, Erol and his mother are already at the airport and ready to meet their father, but he is still not there. All the passengers on the flight have already left, but Gabriel does not even pick up the phone. The employee admits that he could have been detained during the check, but something is clearly wrong here. Marika calls the hotel where her husband is staying, but there she is informed that Gabriel White hasn't checked in yet, which means he should still be with them. After checking his number, it turned out that all Gabriel's luggage was in place, but he was still not there, and he didn't leave any note either. Without hesitation, Marika sets out to find her husband in Princeton. In addition, her father lives there, who is also a physicist and a professor at a local university named Sal. He saw the guy, who disappeared once. Last time he saw him was in the workshop of the student town. According to him, Gabriel brought there a lot of boxes and things, among which they suddenly notice his wallet and phone. Together with her father, Marika begins an active search for Gabriel. They go to the police, question the university staff, campus residents, but all to no avail. Gabriel White simply disappeared without a trace. Frustrated, Marika visits a local student cafe, which she has often visited before. When asked why nothing has changed here since ancient times, the waiter replies that this is what his grandfather, the founder of this establishment, bequeathed. In the meantime, the years pass and Erol grows up without a father, who only occasionally appears in his dreams. 12 years later, the guy became a promising physics student, like his father and grandfather, and meets with the same girl named Grace. Over the years, Erol's mother was never able to cope with the mysterious disappearance of her husband and is in chronic depression. She tries to visit a psychotherapist, but occasionally misses his sessions and does not take the necessary medications. Only grandfather Erol does not lose his hope, who all this time is trying to solve the mystery of the disappearance of his son-in-law. During one of his lectures, being quite late, Erol enters the hall. Not letting his grandson get off the ground, Sal reprimands him, noting that he probably isn't interested in all this. But, just glancing at the board, Erol easily finds an error in the problem that the entire course was thinking about. When the group disperses, the grandfather chastises the grandson for his negligence in his studies. In his words, in terms of his potential, Erol is much ahead of both his father and even more so his grandfather. After that, Sal invites his grandson to go with him to the laboratory. Sal explains to Erol that his father most likely managed to understand the phenomenon of multiple universes. After all, each universe is like one string with time points. So, his father found a way to move along such a string into the past through the so-called mole. All the devices Gabriel left here support this theory. According to his guesses, Gabriel could go back to 1946. But in order to repeat this experiment, Sal constantly lacks the necessary knowledge, because he is not an expert in string theory and quantum mechanics. But Erol, according to his grandfather, is quite capable of this puzzle. In his words, since the moment of the disappearance of their father, they have been living in some kind of alternative reality, where everything went wrong. And if you try to fix everything, then their whole life, both Erol's and his mother, will return to their previous happy course. Erol is skeptical about his grandfather's enthusiasm, noting that his mother has been trying to forget him for so many years and there is no need to stir up the past again. He urges his grandfather to quit this venture and not tell anyone else about it, especially his mother. During one of the evening gatherings, one of the guests looking at a family photo asks Marika, who is this man? She replies that this is her husband, but Erol adds that he died long ago. Left alone with his grandson, Sal nevertheless begs him to tell his mother about this theory. Later on, Erol's mother asks why he never remembers his father and never talks about him. After all, she still always thinks about him. Erol replies that he barely remembered his father at all. He only remembers that in between his travels they often played chess. Marika recalls that Erol's father was a genius and, although he tried to change the world during working hours, he always returned to dinner on time, as well as evenings. Perhaps they bored him. He found another woman and decided to start a new life. Nervous, Erol explains to his mother that he has not gone anywhere, but simply died and is no longer there. After that, Grace visits Erol, but the guy tells her that for now he is forced to look after her mother, because she has another depression. Erol also gives Grace a surprise from childhood, the same Lego spaceship, but with a child. When asked if she wants real children, Grace replies that maybe soon. After these words they kiss sweetly and say goodbye to each other. But looking after his son does not help much, because waking up in the morning Erol finds his mother dead. Marika committed suicide by swallowing pills. After the funeral, Erol decides to ask his grandfather about his theory about his father. Inspired, Sal in the laboratory devotes his grandson to all the details and tells that Gabriel's cherished dream has always been a meeting with Einstein. To maintain the fighting spirit of the professor and his grandson, a cute elderly secretary periodically brings them coffee. She clearly fell for the lonely Sal, and the grandson makes fun of his grandfather on this score. Like Sal, Erol is also deeply immersed in his father's puzzle and begins to pay less and less attention to Grace, who naturally does not like it. This time he did not even go to the celebration on the occasion of the successful defense of her scientific work. In addition to scientific research, Erol also studies the university archives of those years. In one of these articles, he finds information about an unknown person killed in an alley. Near the unidentified corpse, in the photo, Erol notices a painfully familiar pocket watch. Grace spends more and more time alone, but eventually breaks down and visits Erol in the laboratory. And although Sal assured his grandson not to tell Grace anything, the guy gives up and tries to explain that he and his grandfather are trying to create a molehill in order to get to 1946, where his father supposedly moved. But there he was accidentally killed, and there is substantial evidence of this in the photo with the clock. In short, somehow, they need to prevent all this, but it will be extremely difficult to do it. At dinner, Grace asks Erol if they succeed, how their current lives will change. Erol exclaims that then his father will be alive, his mother will not commit suicide, and everyone will be happy. But Grace logically assumes that then their lives can change dramatically. Let's say Erol goes with his living father somewhere to the cinema and meets another girl there. They get to know each other, get married, and everything goes differently. Erol reassures Grace that they knew each other even before his father disappeared and even sat together on the school bus. So, in any case, fate will bring them together again. In an attempt to make love, they accidentally hit the same chessboard that has been waiting for the continuation of the game for 12 years. The arrangement of the figures is broken and Erol frantically tries to put everything in its place. At this moment, Grace finally freaks out and tells Erol that she must stop living in the past, because she is pregnant. Grace leaves, and Erol quickly descends into the basement and, like a possessed psycho, paints the walls with all possible variations of timelines, trying to realize what he can change in the past without ruining the future. Noticing this, Grace confronts him with a choice. Either she or that's it. After all, she is already in her 5th week of pregnancy. But Erol replies that he must try, and Grace leaves in despair. Erol consults with his grandfather about the likelihood of their re-meeting with Grace, but Sal does not guarantee him anything. They clash and Erol leaves. At this moment, the secretary again brings the professor coffee and offers to meet somehow, because he seems so lonely to her. Unlike his grandfather, Erol's personal life is falling apart before our eyes. After another scandal, Grace collects things and intends to leave him. In her words, she cannot come to terms with the fact that at one moment everything can disappear and go the other way. She might as well just have an abortion. Erol tries to explain that this is important for science, but when Grace nevertheless decides to leave, he rushes after her and promises to give up this venture. Erol really refuses his grandfather to continue the experiment, moves with the girl to a new, spacious apartment, and life is generally getting better. At one point, she and Grace even decide to play chess and completely disrupt the alignment of the pieces, as if forgetting about the past. But suddenly Grace has a miscarriage and the depressed Erol decides to return to the old one. After all, nothing stops him now. He and his grandfather carry out the final calculations and draw up a detailed plan of the operation. Only at first, Sal himself intended to go into the past, but Erol convinces him that he must do it on his own. Saying goodbye to Grace, Erol explains that it won't get worse anyway, but there is a high probability that everything will be much better. Heartbroken, Grace silently agrees with him. In the laboratory, Sal puts Erol in a special accelerator and, with the words "see you in a new life," sends his grandson to the past. Everything around is filled with bright light and we are transported into the period of the disappearance of Erol's father. On that very day, Gabriel said goodbye to his family, arrived at Princeton, and asked Sal to help him load some mysterious boxes into the campus basement. Before the experiment, he called Marika, put himself in the accelerator and went into the unknown. Once in the same basement, Gabriel did not notice that someone was already watching him. Dressed up according to the fashion of those times, he went out on the street in 1946. Trying to be unnoticed, Erol followed. Gabriel immediately heads to the house of Albert Einstein, but his neighbor says that at the moment the professor is on his Saturday walk. While waiting, Gabriel decides to visit the dining place, in which nothing has changed since then. He orders coffee, but suddenly Erol sits down next to him and makes the same order. After playing a little guessing games with his father, Erol confesses that he is his matured son. He tells him about everything that happened after his disappearance and how it destroyed the life of his family. Gabriel himself will soon be shot in the alley just because of some trifle in his pocket. They didn't even take his grandfather's watch. Gabriel is very sorry that everything turned out this way and, of course, will do everything to return to his family. In addition, Gabriel adds that his son was born a genius, because in a short time he did something that took him his whole life. Still, he asks Erol to let him meet with Einstein, as he wants to discuss something important with him. Erol is categorically against, because he can be killed again and again, everything will go awry. Here Erol suddenly realizes that this whole situation is an endless time loop and that his version, which is here and now, was created only thanks to this act of his father. Therefore, if Gabriel loves his family, then let him immediately return at the same time where he came from. With these words, Erol suddenly pulls out a pistol and shoots himself in the temple. In the last scene of the film, a puzzled Gabriel returns home from a conference, where he is greeted by his joyful wife Marika and little Erol. The wife asks in surprise if something has happened, because something he returned early. At the same moment, little Grace runs up to the house, asking if Erol will come out. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe to the channel, press the like button and offer any films in the comments that you recently watched. We will try to please you with high quality content as often as possible. See you very soon.